Nowadays, it seems quite commonplace to get standalone superhero video games, but back in the late 2000s and early 2010s, it was a very different time. Cheap tie-in movie games ran riot on the market, with the exception of a couple of Spider-Man and Lego themed video games. So when the critically acclaimed Batman Arkham Asylum came along in 2008, the world of superhero themed video games was changed forever. The sequel, Batman Arkham City, is widely regarded as one of the best video games of the 2010s, if not all time. And because the next Batman-based video game was rapidly approaching, I thought it was high time that there was a sequel to one of the first videos we ever made on the channel. So I set out to play all the Arkham games before Gotham Knights drops, unsuccessfully. I don't really know how I've managed to avoid this series for so long, especially after enjoying Arkham Asylum so much only 2 years ago. The reason I'm playing the remastered version is because I wanted to experience the definitive editions of the game. There are definitely a vast range of mods I could have used for the PC version to enhance my experience, but my thought process was that I should play the version that the devs intended. The same reason I played the remastered version of Arkham Asylum, because it had like the rain effects that weren't able to be implemented in the original release. It's quite annoying to play the games at 30 FPS, being so used to 60 FPS with most modern games made it a bit tough to adjust to playing 30 at such a long time frame. I will be playing Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight on PC though, so I should have a better experience with those games when the time comes. The unfortunate problem, however, is that the remastered versions of this game have a few issues that degraded my experience. The game using dynamic resolution, particularly noticeable in the processing center, makes the game come across as blurry even on the PS5, which should have no problems with this title. You can actually unpatch the game only with a physical disc to run at 60 FPS at the expense of bug fixes and at a lower resolution. Playing these games on next gen at 4K 60 FPS would be a much needed improvement. This is where the PC version particularly shines. You can install mods to improve the visuals whilst also being relatively easy to run on modern hardware at maxed out settings. Now, I'm not really going to speak about the problems with the Return to Arkham remasters, but we could save that for another video, so let us know in the comments if that's something you'd like to watch. Spearheaded by a cast full of Batman royalty, most of the voice actors reprised their roles from the first game. Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill both returned to the roles of Batman and the Joker respectively.
What are you talking about?
Oh, didn't I say?
Whilst the role of Harley Quinn was voiced by Tara Strong, replacing Arlene Sorkin and becoming iconic to the role in her own right.
Wow, look who it is. What do you want, B-Man? What are you?
Arkham City could very well be one of the best sequels ever. The way it expands upon the gameplay from the first game is phenomenally done. All of the original gadgets return with new ones thrown into the mix too. Combat is enhanced with new combos and enemy types, and the gameplay innovations you unlock in Asylum, such as gliding, incorporate themselves phenomenally into the city landscape. The addition of gadgets into combos was a big positive for me and freshened up the gameplay a lot. A big change that also expands the Batman lore is the inclusion of new playable characters in the story. In fact, you start the game off as playing as Catwoman in the very first segment of gameplay if you own her DLC pack, and then you can play as Robin in the Harley Quinn's Revenge DLC. These different characters bring a nice change of pace between big story moments and freshen up the gameplay from being super repetitive, and it ties in well with the rest of the story. On top of this is the iconic stealth gameplay that has shaped a lot of video games. I particularly liked using the smoke grenades to surprise enemies, and then picking them off one by one like the final fight in the Batman. As a whole, I think that the Batman has sort of shaped the way I played the game. There's just something about slowly approaching enemies that really hits different. It's incredible to think about how this game was planned even before Arkham Asylum released. You can find a map of Arkham City hidden behind a fake wall. Even though it's only a small Easter egg, you can tell that there was a lot of care and excitement around where they would take the game franchise, even before anyone had played it. This love and care has definitely been replicated to move the story past City as well. Spread throughout the game as so many hints and foreshadowing towards Arkham Knight, with the likes of Hush, Scarecrow and Azrael getting small story threads that lead straight into the next game. I mean, Azrael literally tells Batman that he will burn. Very subtle. To no one's surprise, the writing continues to excel at the impeccable level set in the previous game. After all, legendary Batman writer Paul Dini was involved in the projects. The head writer of Batman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, and the writer of various Batman books and other Batman cartoons. The story picks up pretty much straight after Arkham Asylum, with the inmates being transferred into Arkham City, a new prison built in Old Gotham. You're thrown into a pretty haunting opening sequence as Bruce Wayne is kidnapped by Hugo Strange, who threatens him with the ultimate consequence: if he interferes with Protocol 10, he will reveal to the world that Bruce Wayne is Batman. He proceeds to throw Bruce into Arkham City, thinking that he would just be a target for the gangs at war inside the walls, effectively leaving him for dead as he passes through the gates to Gotham Hell. Scattered through the open world are hundreds of Easter eggs and iconic locations for hardcore Batman fans with a keen eye to find. Plenty of these are woven into the game's plot, where you face off against an expanded roster of Batman's rogues in comparison to the first game. The story takes a bit more of the supernatural route, with the introduction of the Lazarus Pit and the League of Shadows halfway through the story. They did this in a way that kept it cohesive and in a similar tone to the story and environment set up in the previous game. The devs really went the extra mile to construct the unique atmosphere and deep story, with various minor characters from the comics appearing by name or passing dialogue. Hearing the inmates' conversations not only gives you more insight into the story, but the psychology of those involved in the ongoing gang war. All of these micro elements lead to the open world not being empty and boring, which is a trap that a lot of open world games fall into, particularly Spider-Man, which, whilst it's not a bad open world, it has a good design trying to mimic New York City, but sometimes it just feels as if it's just a tool for the character, instead of being its own character, if that sort of makes sense. Delving deeper into the plotline to learn about Wonder City and being able to explore the secret history of Gotham was a really enjoyable, maybe one of the best parts of the game. Wonder Tower stands tall over Arkham City, but it's actually what lies beneath that reveals the truth, a terrific allegory for Gotham City as a whole. This story fits perfectly hand in hand with the small references and details hidden within Arkham City. The best one I think is stored away in Crime Alley, where you stumble upon chalk outlines of two people, Thomas and Martha Wayne.
Why did you say that name?
Entering Crime Alley feels so unnerving, all of the in-game music stops to leave an eerie silence. It's quite a touching moment when you pay your respects and the music floods back in. Truthfully, this could be one of my favourite moments in Batman media, showing that deep down, he's still just that 9-year-old boy who lost his parents in an act of senseless violence on one fateful night. Left beside the memorial is a bouquet and a tape left by Hugo Strange. His taunting presence looms large over Arkham City and Batman himself. A very low blow that just makes you want to take him down even more. On the topic of Hugo Strange, this game has some phenomenal villains. Following on from Arkham Asylum, we're reintroduced to the Joker, Harley Quinn, Riddler, Victor Zsasz, Bane and Poison Ivy now that they're all housed inside Arkham City. Over the story, we get to learn all of their individual agendas and even team up with Bane in some side quests. The new villains introduced are really good as well. I already spoke briefly about Hugo Strange before, but he is genuinely so menacing and imposing. I honestly would really love to see him in a live action film one day. But then, he sort of feels a bit meaningless when he's killed off and revealed just to be a puppet for Ra's al Ghul, because he never really mentioned knowing Batman's real identity again after he threatened him with exposing it to the world during the opening of the game. One of the new villains that stood out to me was Mr. Freeze, not just for the boss fight either. He has one of the most fleshed out and tragic stories, taking a lot of influence from the Batman the Animated Series episode Heart of Ice, which funnily enough is the name of the trophy you get for finding Nora during his side quest. However, most people just think of the incredible boss fight when they think of Mr. Freeze in this game. The layout of the room and the AI design really forces you to think about your next plan of action. He adapts to your every move by deciding how to destroy the environment based on how you choose to attack him, whilst continuously hunting you down through the room by tracking your footprints and heat signatures. It fits so well for his character being so smart that he will literally stop you from beating him every way he can. This boss really pushes you out of your comfort zone to try new ways of the Predator combat style in the game. You'll probably learn new takedowns to use for the rest of the game at the same time too. This sort of game design making you use everything that you've learned so far whilst giving you the chance to enhance your playstyle and learn new things is a prime example of how Arkham City redefined a genre of video games. How could I forget to mention the Clayface, Solomon Grundy and Ra's al Ghul fights too? All of these are very good in their own rights as well. And of course, how could I forget to talk about the Riddler trophies, all 440 of them. That's almost double the amount in Arkham Asylum, granted there are extra ways to get them in City. Catwoman has 40 of her own trophies for you to find. In a similar way to Asylum, you will unlock the final part of Riddler's story in the game by collecting a set amount of trophies. There are unlockable Riddler hostage missions you get incrementally, and then a final mission where you take down the Riddler at the end of his story path. There's trophies you can only get if you've completed certain parts of the story as well. The city municipal codes for the sequencer that lets you access previously unattainable areas and puzzles is unlocked partway through the main plot when you have to escape the GCPD building. All of this expansion upon the first game creates a much less linear experience than Asylum was, and something more typical of a modern open world game such as Spider-Man or Assassin's Creed. Aside from some of the iconic voice lines from inmates and criminals,
It's the freaking best!
there are a few great visual jokes that you can do. Right at the start of the game, you can just knock the penguin out with an uppercut, and for some reason it's just so funny to me. It's not told to you that you can do that, but it's brilliant that the devs hit this right at the start of the game. No doubt the best and funniest one is found when doing a Catwoman side mission. You're presented with the choice of saving Batman or escaping Arkham City with her loot. If you do decide to leave Batman, the credits start to roll and an ominous message from Oracle tells you that the Joker won and Gotham has become overrun with crime. The game sparks back to life and you literally rewind back to the choice you had to make. The story ends with a Batman who loses everything. Joker, his greatest enemy, and Talia al Ghul, Batman's former lover. This continues into the DLC where we see, somehow, an even more brooding and depressed Batman. Kevin Conroy plays a more monotonous version of the Dark Knight by conveying him more angry and emotional. Whether this was a good decision or not is for you to decide, because it's certainly an unexpected twist thinking they'd kill off the Joker so prematurely. But they had one more game in the series and brought him right back, so maybe they regretted this choice, or was it the plan the whole time? My only real gripes with this game are the overabundance of collectibles and the janky takedown camera. I think Arkham Asylum hit the sweet spot for the amount of Riddler challenges and trophies, and maybe they overcompensated for the expansion of the map in City with such an extreme increase in collectibles, from 240 to 440. It can feel like a chore or a collectathon to grind out all the Riddler challenges, and I'm glad the following games took the amount of collectibles a step down. Occasionally, the takedown camera can glitch out or give you a really unfavourable angle where you can't actually see what's going on. But I think this can just be put down to the game being old and a dated game engine. The lineage of this game and the series as a whole is kind of bizarre. A lot of people seem to have the notion that Batman is ultra violent as presented here, but it's not really the case. This is only done for gameplay purposes, otherwise it would probably be a lot less fun and entertaining as a video game product. In the following years, 2 more Arkham games released, a prequel called Arkham Origins, and a sequel called Arkham Knight. It for sure must have been a tough task to try and make a follow-up to one of the greatest games of all time, but they successfully managed to do this with City surpassing Asylum in the general perception of the series. But we'll go further into depth of these 2 games in their own videos when the time comes. It could be attributed to Arkham City's success that we're still getting sequels set in the same universe all these years later, but the planning of Arkham City well in advance before Arkham Asylum even released may prove this otherwise. Unfortunately, after being told that Warner Bros. And Rocksteady might not be looking to use freelance writers for their games and instead collaborate with in-house DC writers, legendary Batman writer Paul Dini ceased work on any Arkham-related content, and instead they replaced him with Jeff Johns. Yeah, you heard me right. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that this drastically affected the quality of writing in the next game, but we'll have to dive a little deeper into that in its own video. Arkham City wasn't just a hit with the fans either. Various critic reviews and awards cemented this game among the best the industry has to offer as a whole. Some particularly noteworthy wins were the BAFTA Best Action Game Award and the Spike Video Game Award for Best Action Adventure Game. Whilst it didn't win the BAFTA Game of the Year like its predecessor, I'd still argue that the legacy of this game has surpassed that of Asylum. There's definitely a good argument to be made that the atmosphere and the art direction of the open world is not as strong as that of Arkham Asylum, and I would tend to agree. The creepy horror house-esque mood presented through the asylum and its grounds does a much better job at conveying the tone than the concrete jungle of Arkham City, but it certainly tries its best. I also think that Arkham Asylum held its pacing a lot better, because the game isn't revolving around a contrived timer that makes you feel rushed even though you aren't actually limited by said timer. Arkham City not only put its own name on the map, but also defined the future of the Batman games franchise. We might not be here today playing Gotham Knights if not for the uber success of Arkham City. Whether you want to choose to see that as a win or not is down to you. It had such a strong foundation to build off that it owes a lot to, and it evolves the gameplay in a familiar but refreshing way. You also have to give massive respect to the writers who managed to fit characters like Ra's al Ghul, Mr. Freeze, Poison Ivy and Bane into a grounded setting without making them feel out of place. With less bloat to the out-of-story collection, I could have said I had an even better experience, but I already had one of the most enjoyable times playing a game that I've ever had. It's definitely still one of the best superhero games, or even just games in general, of all time. We've seen a couple of games recently come close. The 2 Insomniac Spider-Man games come to mind, but overall I think that Arkham City still holds its own very well as one of the best, despite technical limitations and hardware improvements over the years. If you've made it to the end of this video, let me know if you agree with what I said, and if you haven't played the game before, I highly recommend it for any Batman fans, and for anyone who has looked into getting into the series, I'd also recommend checking out our video we made 2 years ago about the first game in this series, Arkham Asylum. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've been Will, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked what you saw here today, then please consider subscribing to catch our other content as and when it releases.